All right, folks. So let's start. So today we'll study a pseudo random number generator, right? So there's a word here, pseudo. Okay, and then random number generator. Okay, so we'll look at the concept because we are using pseudo random number generator in almost every algorithm that we use in cryptography. Okay, and these are the references. This very nice book by Christopher Parr. But bulk of the lecture again comes from the same source, that is CS161, University of California, Berkeley. And then there's another book which I have added this time, which I find is quite good because it talks more about application of, cryptography. It means that how do you actually, for example, other sources talk, tell us about, say, for example, pseudo number generator in general concept, right? But this book will tell us how to do it. Where actually in real life, where can you get random number generators? What are the algorithms available for that as a library or something like that, right? So this book is quite nice and it's available for free. So you can go online and read it if you want. Okay, all right. So today we'll focus on the following points: need for random number generator, then pseudo random number generator, HMAC based random number generator, okay, or deterministic random bit generator, and then we can also generate random numbers, a pseudo random number using hardware instead of having pure software schemes. Okay, so we'll discuss this topic in very brief. Okay, so before that, look at this cartoon. Okay, so random is actually could be truly random. Okay, in the sense that a lot of things happen in life which are absolutely random. Okay, but we'll also look at why do we need random number generator in cryptography. Okay, before that, let's look at what is random really. Okay, so basically, if you go to astronomy and other subjects, and then you will find a lot of things in the universe happens which is absolutely random. Okay, our world, in fact, the world we live is fundamentally random, and events in our life are also random, right? I mean, it's even our genesis, the way we have been conceived, is actually a random act, out of random act, right? And say, for example, two friends meet, like it happened with my friend. His father met his classmate, a school classmate, in market, and both discuss about family because they're meeting after 30 years, and they say, why not come with your family in the evening? And then they found that my friend, they came with a daughter, and then my friend got married to the daughter, his daughter, father's friend's daughter, and within a month, right? So it was just a random act that both were supposed to meet after 30 years in market. Is absolutely random. Okay, but if you go to theory, especially if you go to Vedantic theory or theory by Indian scripture, there's nothing is random in the world. According to everything is predetermined based on some cause. So there is a cause and effect, and that leads to different events. Okay, so there are a lot of debate in philosophies and so on, but as part of the science, we think that a lot of things do happen randomly, which apparently look randomly, Maybe there may be some cause of that randomness too, but we are not going to go into that. But in general, we will see that a lot of random act happens. Like you are going to airport and suddenly you find that there is an accident of a truck with a car and there's a traffic jam for hours. And you can't reach airport, right? So this is the act of randomness in some sense, right? But there can be some causes behind it, but apparently to us it looks absolutely random. Okay, all right. So you as a person, you will have to think through that how do you plan or how do you secure against the randomness of life? Can you secure? Sometimes we cannot secure ourselves because things are so random and probability of that event is so low, but it happens, right? Then you can't protect yourself, right? Okay. Some events are very of very low probability, but it happens. You can't you can't plan, right? But most of the other highly probable events that may happen in life, you can always plan. Okay. For example, one aspect of planning is that all of us will fall sick sometime or other in life, right? And then many of us will go through some kind of serious disease like heart problem or some other problems, right? And then taking insurance is a way to protect ourselves. All right. Okay. So let's move on to the topic. Any question? When we study security, we'll have to always see that how do we secure ourselves, right? As a human being as well, right? Because same principles applies to our life. Okay. Okay, because something that you have in control usually is yourself. Actually, most of us don't have control over that, but let's assume that we have control, and then there are millions of events or millions of inputs that we receive. Okay, you cannot control the state outside yourself. Okay, then you have to think and plan some security mechanism for yourself. Okay, which should work most of the time, but at least you should be able to detect it that something is happening. Okay, and prevent yourself from ill effects of that. Okay, so many of you would have read this book. Did you? Did anybody read this book?
No, sir.
Okay, so I would suggest, it's a very nice book, a very good book. So please read this book. It's nothing to do with your cryptography, but in general is a good book to read. Okay, it says something like this. For example, something happened. For example, you invested in a stock and a stock doubles within a week, and that was just a random act. But we thought we do it again and then it will happen. So it may not happen, right? So something like that. Okay. Now, randomness is essential for symmetric key encryption because of the key that we have taken, right? In symmetric key encryption, both and that's Alice and Bob have the same key. But somebody must generate this key, right? Okay, so this key, both have the same key, and if this key can be predicted, then game is over. Okay, and this key is very small. Let's say this key is of 3 bits. Then there are only 8 combinations. Okay, so anybody can guess it, right? The probability of guessing is so high, 1 by 8 is very high probability, right? Or generate all these to break encryption, right? Okay, so this key for saying has to be big or large in size. The number of bits should be high, large number of bits. Okay, such that even mallory in between tries to generate key, the probability of generation would be very small, right? If bit, for example, this key size of say 4,000 bits or 4K size, right? So then Mallory has to generate 2 raised power 4K combinations to break it. All right. So it has to be large, and secondly, it has to be random. Even if it's, for example, 2 raised power 4K, and you say that starts with 0, 0, 0, 0, etc., etc., and then next time you take a key which is 0, 0, 1, then it's all predictable. Okay. So the key that we choose, okay, has to be random. Okay. Then we have studied the concept of IV, initialization vector, or nonce. That also has to be random. Okay. And then so we also use sometimes universally unique identifier. Okay. And that also has to be random. Can you give an example of universally unique identifier? Which is the probability of having same ID has to be very, very less. Impossible. Like, I mean, you go to beach in Goa, and probability that two people will pick up the same sand element. Okay. I mean, each let's assume that each element or belongs to one person, and then the two people finally get one same piece of or same element of sand, which is very, very low, right? So then we say it's a very unique, universally unique identifier. Any example? Any application that uses universally unique identifier? Think about it. Did you ever play with cryptocurrency? Bitcoin? Anyone? Okay, did you read this story that one person who had few millions has lost the money because he forgot the key? It's not like bank, in bank you forget your user ID password or your account number, you go and then get it again. In crypto, all that you have is one randomly generated key for you. And if you forget, then this key is quite big, and if you forget this key, then it's over, you can't retrieve your money. Okay, so that's that key that we have. When you open a Bitcoin account, that key is known only to you, nobody else will know that key, right? And then that's kind of universally unique identifier, because if two people have that key or identifier, then the whole system will not work. Okay. Now, if an attacker can predict a random number, then things can go very, very bad. Okay. So the question is that then how do we generate truly random numbers? Any thought about it? If you use an algorithm, whatever with the algorithm, right? You write the algorithm. See, all algorithms are deterministic. Did you think about it? Give the same input, output is always the same. Algorithms in general are deterministic until you add to that non-determinism as an input or randomness as an input. But the whole idea is to generate randomness. So how do you have an algorithm? Any thought? Yeah. Divya, you tell me what do you think? Is it possible to generate truly random bits out of an algorithm? You write an algorithm, can it be truly random?
Sir, yeah, I think it can be done.
How? Think about, you write an algorithm in C or Python. How can you do that? Think about it. You'll say that you have very large number of integers, whatever maximum number of integers you can have, and randomly pick one. How do you randomly pick one? That requires randomness. Okay. Anybody else? Any thought?
So we will always read random numbers to generate truly random numbers.
Yeah, you have to have an input which is absolutely random. Otherwise, you can't generate random number because your algorithms are deterministic. See, we use this word deterministic several times earlier as well. Determinism comes when given an algorithm, give same input, it should produce the same output. So the algorithm that we write are deterministic because it behaves the same way given the same input. Okay, so in general, our algorithms cannot generate random output until we give a source or an input which is truly random. Okay, all right. So we cannot generate random numbers by deterministic algorithms. Okay, all right. Now some technical terms. So in cryptography, when we say random, it means that random and unpredictable. Okay, all right. So for example, you toss a coin and it's a fair coin. So that probability of getting head or tail is 50%. Okay, and you toss it say 100 times and record the output, head or tail, or head is 1 and tail is 0. Okay, and so if it's a very fair coin, then the output is truly random. Okay, so one cannot predict, right? It's impossible to predict. Okay, but here the requirement is also that how many times you flip it, right? Just flip once and then there are two people, one say head and tail, at least one will win, right? So if you say increase this experiment to say 1,000 times, then what is the probability? Anybody can guess it? No, absolutely very, very low probability, right? So then we say it's a kind of random, truly random. So we have this term called entropy, which is a measure of uncertainty. Okay, anything which is more uncertain has higher entropy. Okay, so this sequence that we get by tossing of coin has the highest entropy that one can have, right? So high entropy is unpredictable outcomes and it's desirable in cryptography. Okay, so something that we have seen as a fair coin toss is actually has a highest entropy. Okay, so now the question is that something that we have seen here by tossing of coin is kind of true random number generator, which we use a word called TRNG. So in order to generate pseudo random number, we need a source of true random number generator, right? So there has to be input from true random number generator. Okay, and their output cannot be reproduced. Fine. Any question? All right. So now how do we get true randomness? So you say that you are working on laptop, the exact if you measure them in microsecond, you have pressed a particular key, the output will be kind of truly random, because this is very unpredictable, right? What time instant you have done, if of course a measurement is in nanosecond. Okay. And then there can be a lot of other sources like unpredictable circuit in CPU we can have, or okay, this one we already discussed, the human activity measured in very fine time scale, say microsecond or nanosecond, you have pressed a key, or semiconductor noise or clock jitter in digital circuits. All these are truly random because chances of having the same output being repeated is very low. Okay, so now we need two random number generators to generate session keys. Okay, session key is like in symmetric encryption, or okay, and when we have these sources, physical sources, we call them as entropy sources. Entropy sources. Okay. Then we can combine multiple entropy sources to have true random number output. Okay. So this is, and so a system can take inputs from many entropy sources. Okay. So all right. So the goal is the total number of bits of entropy is sum of the input numbers from bits of entropy, different sources of entropy, right? So many poor sources plus one good source should in general lead to a good entropy. Okay, so these are kind of requirement. Okay. Now the problem with two random number generator or two randomness, these are very expensive and slow to generate. For example, in your laptop, how do you generate? Okay, so there must be some circuit or something, some element, physical element that will give you two random number, right? Okay, and how much time does it take? That's also important, right? So in general, it's slow and expensive. Okay, so now the question is that you can always create sources for two random number. Okay, for example, how much temperature your laptop has at the moment, right? Then it has to be converted into number of digits, and then you need a random number of certain size, and all this then manipulation has to be done. Okay, so in general it's slow and expensive. Okay, so there is a need for fast random number generation, and then we come up with the concept of pseudo, which is nothing but pseudo means fake. Okay, but it should give appearance of a random number generator. So to a naked eye like you, when you're watching output of pseudo random generator, it should look like random number generator. Okay, but note that because it's generated through algorithm, it's always deterministic. If given one true random number, okay, one random number, and then this algorithm to generate pseudo random number, okay, or we call pseudo random number, this output say at some instant is t. If they give the same input again, then it will always give t. All right, so it means it's a deterministic, but it's fine. It's fine because this itself is highly undeterministic. Now what we are trying to do is that take a sample from this, input from this, and create a system which will give a sequence of random numbers or pseudo random numbers. Okay, so because two random number generation is expensive, so use once generated a random number, two random number, and create a sequence of random numbers out of that. That's the idea of pseudo random number. However, it should work because probability of finding out what is the next pseudo random number has got to be very, very small. Okay, any question? We understand difference between pseudo random number and random numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now the question is, how do we generate it? What is the method? Okay. So as we discussed earlier, pseudo number generator or the algorithm for that should use little bit of two randomness to generate random looking output. Okay. And then these algorithms are called deterministic random bit generator or DRBG. Okay. Now now the technique is to use TRNG, which is two random number generator, to generate pseudo random number. Okay. All right. So it's the same thing that we discussed. So whole idea is that use two random number and generate pseudo random number quickly and cheaply. So these are two important things, because if the is slow and expensive, then it's of no use, but it should look like a random number. They're difficult to predict. So of course we know that PRNGs are deterministic. Okay, all right. Because output is generated according to a set algorithms. And most algorithms that you work on are deterministic, right? Okay. So the process is as follows. So we need initial secret, which is like a two random number, okay, which you call a seed. So seed is here. Okay. Now seed can be obtained by mixing various entropy sources. What are the entropy sources that we have seen, right? For example, measure of heat or some circuit output, hardware circuit output, or timer, time you have pressed a key, or maybe something else. These are two sources, these physical sources in some sense. Okay, so you take input from these, or you can take it from multiple sources. Okay, and then combine them, output of these in some set of time in a way, and then create a seed out of it. So we have a seed which is two random number. Okay, and from this seed generate a sequence of random numbers. So we are generating a first sequence number, the random sequence number, second, and so on. Okay, all right. So what we do is that we take this, do some initialization, okay, and then we reach a state, state of the system, right? Okay, and then do some updation, using some algorithm, okay, and generate a random number. And this is some kind of one way function. Okay, so basically given one random number, you should not be able to reach to state of a system. Okay, like hash functions are one way. Okay, so we have to use something similar to hash. Okay, and then the system state changes, and then go to next state, generate the next random number, and so on. Now note that this all is deterministic. Okay, but given one random number, it should be almost impossible to predict the next random number. How do we do that? Because this all is deterministic, right? Now see, what we do also is that, of course, this is smart algorithm that we use. Okay, for example, when we use hash here, and even a hash output is unpredictable, it's a one way, right? Okay, so even there is a single bit change in input of hash function, then output is very, very different. Okay, so use something in something like hash here. That's one way. And second is that keep adding some entropy. Okay, these are only two ways that are possible, right? So pseudo random number generator takes n bit seed as an input. Okay. Now this n is fairly large, such that if attacker wants to generate seed, he has to try 2 raised power n possible seeds, and which is, if n is large, then it's very difficult. Okay, all right. So it should be done within, say, a normal operation. It should be done within some time. If the time to break it is in years or hundreds of years, then our job is done, right? So it's large enough. It means an n should be large enough such that attacker should not break it within some limitation of time and computation. All right. All right. So when we have a pseudo random number generator, it will take initial seed and then generate as many pseudo number bits as needed on demand. So in order to do that, PNRG maintains some internal state and update the state anytime PNRG generates a new bit and receives seed as an input or receives seed as input. So basically, state transition, as we discussed, can happen in two ways. Is that there is a algorithmically it can go to the next state. Okay, and then one state to another state here, or when there is a new seed, which we call reseed. Okay, all right. So PNRG pseudo random number generator has three functions. First is the seed, initial seed, take initial seed, and from that initializes the internal state using the entropy or seed. Okay, all right. So basically this seed is truly random number bits that we input, and then we reseed it. As we mentioned that in between in the process you add additional seed. Okay, and then you generate output. All right. So you start with seed. Okay, generate initial state, use deterministic algorithm, and use some next function which is like hash to produce output, and keep moving on, and sometime or other reseed it. Okay, and so on. So that's how it works. All right. So what are the properties? It's deterministic. Using the same seed twice produces the same sequence of random numbers. Okay. So that's it. So if you need if you know a seed by a pseudo random number generator, then PRNG should be completely predictable. But the question is that, do you know the seed? How do you guess the seed, and so on? So that's impossible. Okay, and then of course hash function. Note that hash function is also deterministic, right? Isn't it? It's one way, but deterministic. Otherwise, you cannot do integrity check. So given same input to hash function, output is always the same. So the whole circuit is deterministic, but it's done in such a way that there is a huge changes in the output. It's difficult to guess what is going to be next random number. Okay, that's all. Okay, and secondly, it has to be efficient. It means that it should be fast. Okay, third is security. It means that it should be indistinguishable from random. Okay, it means that observing random number generated alone should not allow anyone to recover internal state of random number generator, pseudo random number generator. Right? All right. So there are two important concepts here. First is called forward secrecy. Okay. So PRNG has forward secrecy if the attacker learning the state of system, and that can be done by getting into your computer at some point in time, for example, does not allow PRNG to retrieve previously generated random number. So at this point is a compromise. Okay, from here we cannot go internally and find out from there what were the past random number generated. Okay, all right. And second is called backward secrecy. Okay, so backward secrecy, if the compromise state does not allow, predicting the future random number. So if this state is compromised, from there, if we know this state as an intruder, I'm sorry. Okay, this state is compromised. It should not allow me to find out the next state or next random number that's generated. Okay. All right. So that's how it is, right? So now, okay, that's possible only if we introduce in between some additional entropy. Okay. If new entropy is introduced, injected in the updated system after the compromise. Okay, so there's the concept. Okay, so in order to avoid, in order to okay, where are we? Okay, all right. Okay, so in order to have backward secrecy, we need to introduce new entropy in between, additional entropy. So even if this state is compromised, then because of addition of entropy or randomness, then now this state will not be predictable. Any question? Okay. Okay, then we need, of course, we discuss the concept of seeding and reseeding. Okay, the number of bits of entropy should be sum of the number of bits in all sources. This point we have discussed earlier. And PRNG should be seeded with all available sources of entropy. It's just not one source, but multiple sources, because by adding multiple sources, we bring in more randomness or higher level of entropy. Okay. And then there are, of course, condition that we discussed earlier. The combining many low entropy sources should result into high entropy output. Okay, it means that we have many sources that are of low entropy. It means that their predictiveness is not that high, but once we combine them, it should be done in such a way that overall output of that combination should be output with high entropy. Okay. Okay, and second is that if one source of entropy has, or one source has zero entropy, it means that it's predictable. Zero entropy means it's a predictable thing, right? Then it should not reduce the entropy of the output. Okay, all right. Okay. So reseeding concept we have already studied. The reseeding is used to add even more entropy as it becomes available. Note that two entropy sources are slow. So it will take some time to regenerate or generate or output from those two random number or those sources, entropy sources. So it will take time for the output of those entropy sources becoming available. Measurement time, for example, you're taking measurement of system. It will take milliseconds. If not milliseconds, maybe sometimes it will take hundreds of milliseconds. Okay, because there's a physical element here, right? So now, as soon as it becomes available, then use that. Okay, in the process. All right.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, so like here we are using two random sources to generate the pseudo random number, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why can't we just use the like sum of, like we said that like using multiple low entropy sources, we can get a high entropy source. So why can't we just use that as our random number?
Yeah, you can do that. What was the motivation of pseudo random number? Your algorithm may need pseudo random number hundreds of times in every few milliseconds, right? So you can use it. Of course, you can use it. Nobody stops you from doing that, but it's expensive. Okay, and also it's slow.
Okay.
And there's the only reason. Otherwise, you can, if you have sources, two random number generators available cheaply and which can flush out the number at very fast speed, of course you can do that. Nobody stops you from doing that, right? Okay. Yeah, and I guess there must be some element of convenience also of the use. Your input to algorithm, does it come from if it comes from you know some physical source versus it comes from algorithm, another algorithm, could be, I don't know, maybe, but the first 2 points are important, the speed and the cost. All right, okay. So initial seed has to be long. Okay. So here we assume is S bits long. So secure pseudo random generator is computationally indistinguishable from a random to attacker. Attacker should not be able to guess the next random number, or it should look like two random number to an attacker. Okay. All right. It means that attacker should not be able to predict the future output of PRNG. Okay, and in practice, it's very often you'll find there examples wherein a random number generator didn't work, and it happened once in St. Louis, a casino in St. Louis, where players could find out if you pull the lever after a certain delay, then you can win. Okay, and as a result of that, casino lost huge amount of money. Okay, and in fact, you go to internet, you'll find out how to win in a casino and slot machine. You'll find different suggestions. Okay, because ultimately inside they are using pseudo random number generator, and if you done it improperly, then people are smart enough to find that out. Okay, all right. So you'll find many places where things have really gone wrong. Okay, all right. Now let's another 5 minutes. Let's close, and then let's look at one way of generating a random number, pseudo random number generator. It is called HMAC. We know by now what is HMAC is, hashMAC, right? And use that to generate DBRG, deterministic random bits, right? Okay, all right. So HMAC DR DBRG, deterministic random number generator, DRBG, not DBRG, DRBG. Okay, okay. HMAC DRBG is commonly used pseudo random number generator. Okay. D stands for deterministic, R stands for random. This is a bit and generator. Okay. So DRBG. Okay. So we know HMAC output looks random, although it's deterministic, but looks random, right? Because just change one bit of input of HMAC, then output changes, by many bits, right? And which is which is not predictable easily, right? So we can then use HMAC to build PRNG. So HMAC, we know that takes two inputs, okay, a key and then input, which is a message. All right. So basically now here the key is random. All right. Or its source of entropy, or initially we can use some deterministic number and then use HMAC, then it becomes non-deterministic. All right. So one simple algorithm is as follows. Take some random bits S, okay, and initialize the internal state of. So let's assume the initially key is 0 and V is 0. Okay, and then out of that you generate key K, which is HMAC of K, and K is the key, which is it comes from here, and then V, which is initially it is 0, and concatenate it with 0 0 and concatenate it with random source S, okay, which comes from entropy sources. All right, and use this algorithm. Then V is equal to HMAC KV and so on. And now you change it from 0 0 to 0 1 and do the same thing. Right. So in this way we can generate random numbers. Okay, all right. So please go through it. This is the algorithm given. Will not exactly same thing within a while loop. Okay, so we can generate in this way because this will use this repeatedly to generate sequence of random numbers, and of course somewhere or other you'll have to introduce the additional entropy. Okay, all right. Okay, and then we can prove that HMAC is secure, is as secure as okay, or HMAC DRBG is as secure as HMAC. Okay, and we have seen that HMAC is secure, so we can say that HMAC DRBG is also secure. Okay. Now, of course, you can prove it, but we don't have time and energy to discuss the proof. Okay, so but we can say that if you break HMAC DRBG, then you have either broken HMAC or underlying hash function. Okay, all right. So basically, if you can distinguish PRNG output from random, then you have distinguished HMAC from the random. All right. Oh, sorry. All right. So now we can use hardware based. So normally random number generators is basically algorithm or is a software based. Okay, of course input comes from some entropy sources, but you can also use hardware to generate random number bits. Okay, and like in Intel processors you will find RD rand as an instruction to generate random number bits, but it was using some input from somewhere. Okay, so it basically something that you are doing algorithmically you can do also in hardware. Okay. So here using hardware of course increases the speed. Okay, all right. Okay, that's all. I mean basically instead of using normal algorithm based or software based random number generator, you can use the hardware. Okay, to summarize, two randomness requires sampling of physical process. It could be many. It means there can be many sources of entropy. Okay, these are slow, expensive, and at time biased. Okay, but combination of this biased and slow sources should be done in such a way that overall entropy is high, but still it remains slow and expensive, right? And hence there is a motivation for the generation of pseudo random number. We take periodically this output of two random number generator, okay, or the entropy, and then initially use it at seed, and then later on we reseed it with these outputs whenever this entropy inputs are available. Okay, and the concept is that we have initial seed, then after some time, after generation of few random number, we reseed it, and then of course generation of random number output, pseudo random number. Okay, so these are three main steps. Since security is that computationally indistinguishable from truly random number bits, and then we have studied two resistances, forward and then the rollback or backward resistance. Okay, and one example we have seen, which is HMAC DRBJ. Okay, all right. Any question?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in the forward and the backward secrecy, we are doing just the opposite thing as the name justifies. Because in the forward secrecy, we are backtracking the previous step, and in the backward, we are going for the future state.
Yeah, I mean, basically, given you hack into computer
Means
state.
the name just justifying the opposite thing what we are doing at that
No. So the idea is that if you hacked into a system now at this point in time, can you find out previous states or previous random number generated? Okay. All right. So system should not allow that. And then another is this called forward, and backward is that given one state, can you state of system, you hacked the system, then after some time, of course, system will continue to generate random numbers, pseudo random. Can you find out the future random numbers? The condition for that is that you'll have to add additional entropy for that. Okay, so try to design a system which have resistance both ways. But technically both are different, finding out in the back and the future. Now future is simpler because it's all deterministic. Backward should also be difficult because you don't know where the entropy has been added. Okay, think about it. Okay, all right then. Thank you.